So cannabis cultivators, manufacturers should strive to develop a robust testing regime on a core part of their business plan. Everyone believes that? Anyone doing it would be the second question. It includes a continuous analysis of their products from every stage in their manufacturing and best advocates to help you design the right testing regime so you are in the laboratories themselves and spend time considering the elements of the testing laboratory will take account, deciding which tests and what frequency are right for you. So all 12 of you are here, so that makes me encouraged that a number of people are still looking at testing. And rather than me naming off each person, I figured just because we are in the beginning, I'll just have you name yourselves and tell what you do. I'll start with Phil on this side.
Okay, I'm Phil Northcutt. I'm the CEO of Sierra Gold Hemp, and we primarily extract CBD from industrial hemp using ethanol.
I'm Wesley McGuire. I'm the chromatography technical manager from Pixis Labs and Columbia Food Labs. We do a variety of different analytical testing services. My personal background is in residue chemistry, but we are a full-service lab that now serves cannabis and hemp industries as well.
I'm Anthony Smith, Chief Science Officer for Evio Labs, a North American chain of labs focus on hemp and cannabis testing. So we do all sorts of in-process and state-required testing, but also client special quality assurance programs and testing and stuff.
I'm Daniel Sliva from CSO from DSTest Laboratories, and my background is in molecular biology and genetics, and we are analyzing real efficiency or efficacy of different natural compounds or products, and we are also analyzing stuff from hemp. So what is important, you know, and I'm surprised there is not so many people interested in the real testing, because the testing is crucial, especially in the CBD industry, because there is so many different products from so many different sources, and if you really don't know what is inside, and if you really don't know if it's active, this is really bad for the whole CBD.
I'm Alex Loznov. I'm the president and CFO of Advanced Extraction. We're a vertically integrated hemp producer out of Brighton, Colorado, with a grow division, lab processing and extraction facility, as well as contract manufacturing and a retail brand.
I'm Derek Duchesne with EcoGen Laboratories, vertically integrated hemp manufacturer and specialty ingredients producer. We are one of the top 3 leading genetics companies in the United States, the largest hemp processing company in the United States. We also sell and fabricate all of our own processing and extraction equipment, as well as a handful of white label finished products out of our GMP facility.
Looks like we're good. So one of the things we'd like to do in the panel is certainly get some of your questions. So if you can be thinking of them along the way, that would be good. So when I'm looking at the testing laboratories, and it talks about the number of certified ones and the amount of data they produce. So for me, one of the questions I have for the people that have a laboratory is, what is the most common request that you get for analysis of a hemp, for example?
The most common request for hemp stuffs is cannabinoid content by far. You know, whether that's biomass, crude extract, polish extracts, value-added products, topicals, formulas, you name it. That's the most common test that we do.
To add on to what Anthony's saying, what tends to drive testing initially is regulation and requirement. So in the hemp space, the most common testing is cannabinoid potency, because they need to demonstrate, first of all, that they do qualify as hemp federally, so that they have to demonstrate that they're below 0.3% THC in the product, and then they need to quantify the other cannabinoids of interest, primarily CBD. Above and beyond that, we look at safety-based testing and public health-based testing. So pesticide residues, fungal metabolite residues, metals residues. For extracts, we look at the residual solvents from the manufacturing process and those sorts of things. But the regulation is scant on hemp, where in state cannabis programs it tends to be a little more well-defined. So it will definitely vary from client to client depending on their needs.
So we are testing the real efficiency or efficacy, as I said before, and I would only comment that strictly from the pharmacological point of view, potency, it means real activity or effectiveness. Sometimes, but it's fine, people are referring to potency as a concentration of specific products. But potency is really efficiency. So what we are doing, for example, our clients, they want to market their products for some specific conditions. Let's say inflammation. So we can test if their starting material is anti-inflammatory and also if their final product is anti-inflammatory, because you have to realize that, let's say, you can say I have really potent CBD extract, maybe CBD isolate, 98% of CBD, this is great. We know there is activity of CBD. However, if you are gonna prepare your final formulation, you will put some additional compounds or fillers to the final product. So these fillers actually can kill the real activity. Let's say anti-inflammatory activity, or we are also testing potency for anti-cancer activity and some other activities, how the manufacturers want to market their products.
Anything else chime in?
Yeah, they overwhelmingly said the most common test was potency. And, a potency test, we purchase around 10,000 pounds of biomass a week, and a potency test has very little value to us. I really think that, there should be a requirement to do a full panel before the hemp leaves the farm. Because a lot of farmers, they're going to show you their potency, they're going to say, look how amazing my crop is, but when you do a full panel test on it, it may have heavy metals, it may have microbials or pesticides that the farmer's not even aware that we're looking for.
Yeah, so I was curious about on the extractor side, so and what you guys were looking for based on their response.
Yeah, and to continue, what he's saying, and I think it's very important, for, yes, the potency is, obviously the most popular, but, as consumer and business owners and brands, are learning more about, their supply chain, it's initially, you need that full panel testing because, the market is flooded with, imported product that is filled with, hemp it's an incredible plant with, so many different benefits, and one of those things is, cleaning and remediating and pulling everything out of the soil. And so if you're growing it in a place that's heavily polluted and there's a lot of toxins in the soil, that's all going to be reflected in, in the plant material. So I think it's extremely important, not only as a processing side. Obviously we have ways of remediating and processing out these things. Heavy metals is very, very tricky to process out. Pesticides is much easier. But when it comes to on the consumer side, and a lot of brands, I think the education and misinformation is two very different things of what's out there. But demanding a full panel on not only your raw materials but also on your finished products to really understand and make sure that your product is safe.
Yeah, and then just to comment, I think what's tested has been stated by the panel, but I think as you indicated relating to what a full panel is, every individual state's panel may be different. Obviously, throughout the country in the U.S., California is going to have the most stringent requirements for what that panel requires to be tested. And right now, it's challenging for a producer who's selling across the U.S. because if you're not going out and getting a test panel that includes everything that would be required in the state of California, then your finished product may not be qualified in that state while it may be eligible in another state.
Anthony?
I think along the lines with what these guys are talking about, full panels, but also think about representative sampling. We still, experience buyers who say, well, yeah, I'm buying 4 tons of this stuff, and they bring in 3 grams, and they want to test. I'm not advocating to make like on the cannabis side, make the labs go directly to all forensic, but natural products and herbs of commerce and even pharmaceutical in-process chemicals, there's all sorts of procedures and ways to do representative sampling based on the type of risk that you want to incur with your product and how much stuff there is. And, I just mentioned one extreme, bringing 1 or 2 grams to represent 1 or 2 tons, but more representative sampling and maybe more multiple panels. Maybe you should run an entire panel on every train load or something like that.
Yeah, and I think touching on that specifically is batch testing and lot testing and pulling something if you're a farmer or you're buying a finished goods, if you're a brand or manufacturer, pulling samples from multiple lots, especially as the quantities increase. And for example, big outside of the raw material side, on the genetics side, people will run these tests on 100 seeds or 1,000 seeds, and here's our feminization tests and our germination reports. But in reality is you're growing, you're growing hundreds to thousands of acres of these plants, so getting a real gauge and a real spectrum and enough data to test to get those accurate results is extremely important.
Yeah, another thing is just that it's not just testing the biomass. In the entire process from farm to sale, there's a lot of places where you can introduce contaminants into the process. And so I think you want to test it on the farm, you want to test it before it goes through your equipment, you want to test it when it comes out of the equipment. We test our waste product as well to see what's left in it.
So much.
And then also, look at if it's been in the bottle for 6 months, you should take that product and bring it back and test it, so that you have a real idea of what's going on for the entire life of the product until it gets to the consumer.
I think stability testing is what you're indicating as far as then the activity levels do they maintain in that product over time.
And in addition, leachates from packaging, contamination from processing equipment is extremely common, but not always in the forefront of our minds, because if we believe that we're beginning with a clean starting material, we may not consider that there are these other steps where contaminants can be introduced. The lab can help you with that, is sort of my point.
I would mention the contamination. If you are producers, definitely fine. You are going to find some laboratory. However, if you are a manufacturer and you are looking for some sources, this is totally different story, and I can give you an example. It's actually from some tests which we have done in the dietary supplement industry. We're testing efficiency of green tea extract and some mushroom extract for some biological activities, but what was interesting, they sent us certificate of analysis. And I'm checking the certificate of analysis, and totally different biological species, green tea and mushroom, okay? And how it's possible that the level, really low level of contamination of heavy metals, what they detected was the same. So if you are buying something, I'm not saying I want U.S. companies because we should be reliable, but some actually manufacturers, they are taking the stuff from China, and I'm actually talking about the Chinese samples. It's a huge problem, the contamination, and that is what we discussed in the previous panel. That certificate of analysis, how it's real, because there is so many fake certificate of analysis or recycled certificate of analysis, because every new batch should be properly evaluated and tested.
Yeah, we actually have an entire panel tomorrow dedicated to discussing the certificate analysis. What consideration should go into that? I don't know, Daniel, if you're on that panel or not, but we will go really in depth into that. But I would back that up and say that whether or not you are manufacturing or producing under, say, GMP guidelines, third-party testing and verification of these products is absolutely essential, because whether it's an intentional fraud or not, what is on a certificate of analysis may not be representative of exactly what you get. It depends on variance lot to lot. It depends on a number of other places where contaminants and impurities can get introduced, and it depends on the reliability of the supplier in the first place. So, really relying on testing things yourself and knowing what's in your product, I think, is a lifesaver in making sure your final product is consistent.
Yeah, we have a saying: never trust anyone else's COA. If you're anywhere in the CBD business, in my opinion, you should have a relationship with the lab, and you should be conducting your own testing.
And absolutely, as most manufacturers or processors out there, we will have our own, chromatography, HPLC, testing methods. But I would never trust a lab that sends out, their product with their finished testing. It should be from, an accredited, facility, and from a lab such as, one of these gentlemen, because it's the third-party verification that really, it should be mandatory and should be a standard. But unfortunately, the regulations aren't there yet. But for companies, such as ours and everybody on the stage, regulations are our friends. Regulations as they come out will be our friends.
Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test, 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 test. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test, 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 test.
Main criteria.
Who's got the log? Do you have the log in?
8 miles.
As long as he doesn't go to the bathroom, Christine, I'm good. The minute I hear the flushing, I'm getting anxious. Back to you two. Who was speaking?
I was.
There you go.
I was just saying, hopefully the cheapest and the fastest is not your prime criteria for how you choose a relationship with the lab. The labs can't do cheap and fast, but
Not that they can't.
it shouldn't be the first thing that you're looking for.
Not in a relationship, typically.
Not in a relationship.
Not in a relationship.
Another thing is, I think, tour the lab. A lab should welcome you into their facility and say, look at our technology, this is how we do it. If they're for some reason are hesitant or don't want to invite you down to the lab, I would question that, and I would look for a different lab.
Absolutely, that's that's something that up until very recently, that's been a very up until after the Farm Bill, everybody was kind of operating under the radar and in the shadows, and it was very, very hard to find credible testing and credible manufacturers, and everybody. If you Google CBD company right now, the first 50 pages is vertically integrated, and every lab's the biggest and best, right? So, come see their facilities, come vet, come see the leadership team, come see the infrastructure, and whether you're buying a very small amount or a very large amount, I think it's understanding that not all CBD is created equal, and there's some really there's a lot more snake oil out there than there is credible, legitimate operations. So demanding that transparency, I think should be a must if you're starting or if you're planning to add CBD to your product lines.
Yeah, another thing too is that we have found that, we've tested with maybe 10 different labs over the last year, and we get varying results from different labs. So, I don't know what the solution to that is. I think there maybe has to be some standardization or regulation. I don't want to get too deep into their side of the thing, but, you might want to try a few different labs out, see how they handle your product, see what their turnaround's like, see what their lab is like. It's a relationship, and you're not, like any relationship, you're not going to get into it with the first person you meet. Be willing to date a little bit, We
bored 2 more people.
In addition to that, I think that it's important to spend the time to develop that relationship. Everybody wants to send their samples in and get results on a super fast turnaround time, 3 days, 2 days, next day. But developing a relationship with a lab is critical, and that's what I hear everybody up here talking about. Finding out what services that lab can provide for you and how we can customize those to fit your needs. Spending the time, as was mentioned, to visit, to inspect, to audit, to make sure that your quality standards match expectations. These are the steps that it takes to build a relationship, and they don't happen overnight. There is going to be variance among labs. There's even going to be variance from result to result in the same lab at times, and part of that I can say is in a new market like cannabis in state markets and hemp nationwide, you have a lot of new labs, and those labs will often need time to refine their methodology to fit your needs, and you can find the best lab that's out there, or you can work with the lab that you have. I advocate both approaches because anybody who's in this business, I hope, is dedicated to providing you high quality data, to meeting your needs, and to ensuring that you have a safe and consistent product, and building that relationship and refining those methods over time will only improve both the laboratory's work and your process as well.
It is important, don't be blinded, but such called certifications, because there is standard certification ISO 17025, but it is the specific certification for some only specific method. So, but let's say you can have your balances in the lab certified for ISO 17025. Okay, this is certification for the balances. However, it is not certification for special analytical method for your CBD. So this is what is really important to understand. And again, number one, visit the lab and create some relationship, and you will see how it's going to work.
That's a really good point, actually, and I won't spend too much time drawing back the veil of the laboratory accreditation process, but while I am a big advocate for working with accredited laboratories, my laboratory holds dual accreditation for almost all of our hemp and cannabis analysis. That is absolutely true. There are labs that that love to throw the stamp of accreditation on all of their documents. However, the way that accreditation bodies certify your laboratory is method by method, and so take the time to ask questions, understand what the laboratory is doing and what they mean when they make claims about their accreditation status and their certification. It is not an absolute deal breaker whether or not a lab is accredited, but it is an indicator of quality and how they're accredited and for what.
And
sorry. Plus, in addition to that one, I'm coming originally from academia, so I was surprised, how this stuff is working in industry. There is so many such called dry labs. Okay, so dry lab, it means they are not providing any analysis. They can be, somewhere in the garage or basement, and they can write some data and, to send you the data. So again, visit the lab and establish some relationship, and you will see how it works.
Yeah, what we do is we try not to tell the lab what the sample is or what our hopes are for the sample. Because what we've learned is if you tell someone, hey, we want to test some tea-free distillate, that magically that sample will come up under 0.3. So we try to just say, here's our sample, please test it for us. These are the tests we want, but we don't tell them what our goals are.
And back to touching on what when it comes to accreditation and what those processes are, it came to my attention when I was at the MJ BizCon in Copenhagen that a lot of processors on the manufacturing side are claiming GMP, X, Y, and Z, different accreditations, and then when you, especially if you're importing, exporting to Europe, they need to see what those GMP certifications are, and if somebody's accrediting their isolate or their distillate or their tea-free or whatever the product is, that it's GMP, but their processes and their paperwork, it's for their bottling room. And they're capping, so it's not taking that a step further and really understanding what those certifications for and what methods those are actually for, because you get that one GMP and that's on every marketing material that they'll ever have, but in reality it has nothing to do with their actual manufacturing of their products.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add, I think that laboratory methodologies are really important, as was indicated by a couple of the panelists, and also where we stand as an industry right now on the ability to get samples of these compounds, because right now you could go to 3 providers of standards in the industry, and those standards, after being tested, could have a 5% variance on those standards, very highly accredited companies. Yeah, or more. And I'm sure, I'm not a lab guru, so I'm sure some of the panelists could speak of that much better, but people need to understand that these standards have to be coming from somewhere. You have to be getting accredited standards, but just because you have accredited standards, depending upon which company you got that from, there will be variances within those standards, which then puts more variance into the testing, not even between labs, but within that individual lab.
Yeah, I can add to that really quick. Particularly under the ISO 17025 accreditation standard, it is the responsibility of the laboratory to ensure that the standards they are using for reference and for measurement are accurate. It's not the responsibility of the supplier, which means it's even more critical for you to know that you can trust your lab. And the only way you can know that is to work with them, to build that relationship, and to learn what they're doing and how they know that their results are valid. You know, there's a lot of different labs in this space because it's a brand new market, and you know, quality does vary, but there's a huge amount of responsibility on the lab to verify for themselves that they are providing you good results, and it's up to you as manufacturers and producers to ensure that the lab is up to snuff.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is you have to educate yourself. You have to know enough to have a conversation with your organic chemist or your lab. You have to understand what ASTM standards are, or what LOQ means, or CFU versus parts per billion. You have to have some understanding. You don't have to be an organic chemist, but you know, sometimes an organic chemist will wow you with some technical talk, and you're like, this guy must really know what he's talking about. But you have to know at least enough to converse with him.
I'm going to take that personally.
No, I know a lot of guys like that.
I'm an organic chemist. It's all out there. So, Christine, can you see if there's any questions from the audience?
Hi, gentlemen. Thank you. As a molecular biologist, I think that genetic testing is going to be pretty important. You have companies like MGC coming out, who I actually personally know them, and Phylos Genomics as well in Portland. How integral do you think it's going to become to take the analytical chemistry and the genetic testing, combine them into one, and include that in your QA, QC, and COA authenticities?
Well, it's hard to say. I can definitely envision a world where people consider that essential, like that knowledge about genomics and the precise origin of the strains in combination with the actual chemical composition. That's the world that I dream of, where we break everything down to its most basic components and know absolutely everything about the complexity of our product. I doubt that will become the standard easily or quickly, because it's not driven by regulation, but it can be driven by business leaders. So for those who want to set a new standard for what we know about the product, you can raise that expectation, and your lab can work with you to do that.
Yeah, and I think your head's in the right place, because a lot of the problems that I think the industry is having, people are looking for the extractor or the lab to solve that, and I think a lot of those problems are going to be solved at the genetic level.
It's true that I'm a molecular biologist. Like a lot of those tests are probably not required, I guess, for public health and safety, but they are absolutely a required part of laboratories' business development. I mean, we can build a business that's based on mandatory state-required testing, but if you really want to grow a business, you have to continue to add products and add value to your clients' work. And genetics testing, sequencing, array of molecular assays are definitely adding value to our clients' operations and processes as well. So it is essential, I think, for the labs to embrace this type of other stuff that's not, required by the state?
I think probably not now, maybe in the future, because we have to realize that CBD space is relatively new. If you compare it with the dietary supplement industry, which is here for some time, and still there are new regulations and new questions. So I think, you are asking about genetic testing. This is still far away from the dietary supplement industry. They passed the first thing that, okay, no contamination and good characterization, let's say chemical analysis, good potency. Now it's moving to find the real efficient or produce real efficient products. And still, it's far away. So I would say that in the CBD, we are a little bit, it's going to come, but I don't know when. But definitely more characterized your product and more educated your customers will definitely help. And by that, actually, you can develop specific brand of your product.
I think the real interest there is going to come from business, because if you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in a crop, that's a very risky endeavor, and you mitigate risk with information. And so if you're able to get that genetic information and you can determine, 0.25% over millions and millions of pounds of biomass is a big deal. So this is where I think the interest from that is going to come. I don't think it's going to be at the consumers aren't going to look for that. It's going to be people who are spending money in the industry.
And I think, there's such a big disconnect, yes, with, the one thing, to have your finished goods, your raw materials tested, but when it comes to, now that the industry has grown so much that the biomass is coming from so many different farms. So, when you're putting in thousands of pounds per run, a lot of this biomass is coming from a lot of different seeds, a lot of different farms, and there's so many different variants. So by the time it even gets to the manufacturer, or the co-packer, or even to the testing facility, they have no idea, where that biomass or where that farm came from. So I think that, yes, as the industrialization continues and the scalability continues, like right now there's not, for the way that the demand is going and the amount of biomass that's left in the United States, or the quality that's ability to process, there's not enough for all the farms combined to get through, this season. So as it, continues, and hopefully it doesn't turn into a Monsanto situation where it's the same seed at 5,000 farms, but there's a major disconnect between the seed, to what the raw material to the finished product. So perfect world, like I said, regulation is our friend, and we'd like to get there one day, but I don't think that we're anywhere near that point.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, and I think just as far as it relates to genetic material, it is going to be on the grow side that's going to be most relevant. There's really, I think, very little from a final product side outside of the smokable products, and I think that's where the whole smokable world could end up developing and would be much more important from a finished product standpoint as far as hemp cigarettes, hemp flower. But of course, there's a lot of regulation that's still going to determine the viability of those products in the marketplace. So I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to be, as most of the panel discussed, on the grow side of the business and what that brings to the sustainability to be able to produce a large amount of biomass that is consistent, so that when it goes to that processor, they know as they're working with that product that they're having a consistent product through the process and can produce a finished product then that has the appropriate results that will generate the same result.